Hi, it's Dwyer. It's January 28th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, one of the things I love, and I mean this, about my YouTube subscriber base here, right? We're not the biggest. I wouldn't trade my subscriber base for any subscriber base, is that people talk back to me, right? They, the dynamic is such that we're all around a bar table debating things. So a number of you have pointed out in the comment section of the video I made yesterday, where I pointed out that for a variety of reasons, Terence Crawford doesn't stand much of a chance to beat Canelo. A lot of you have pointed out to me that I picked Crawford over Canelo in the past, and I plead guilty. Right? Understand, I picked Crawford when he was fighting at 147 to beat Canelo, right? To gain the weight and to fight Canelo at 168. I would have rather have seen Crawford against Canelo than Jermell Charlo against Canelo. Right? Just understand, I feel Canelo is vulnerable to a mover fighting out of a southpaw stance. Right, folks? I've felt that way for years. The problem is then I saw Crawford against Madrimov. I thought Crawford had problems in that fight. I thought that fight was a close fight. If you agree or disagree with me, tell us about it in the comment section. Feel free to be aggressive. This is the forum for that. Right? But I thought Crawford had problems against Madrimov. I just feel Crawford doesn't have a chance here. And Crawford's a closer, right? The way Crawford won fights was by stoppage. He had some close fights going into the later rounds. The Sean Porter fight, he closed the show, right? Crawford is dominant to the point where, he stops people like Kell Brook, Amir Khan, right? Crawford takes things out of the hands of the judges when he's at its best. Who has stopped Canelo that way, right? Mayweather beats Canelo on points. Right? One judge, I disagree with the judge, but one judge had that fight a draw. Bivol beats Canelo on points. Right? Well, let's shake up the conversation here. Because my point is, if you're relying on trying to win against Canelo, you're going to have to look like Roy Jones looked against James Toney, where you not only look better than the other guy, you actually knock the other guy down. Right? There's a certain point where a fighter can't be robbed. He's looked so dominant that even the judges know in the later rounds, gee, there's going to be blowback if I vote against this guy. Let me also say, too, that I don't think Canelo's unbeatable. Understand, in my favorites folder right now, I have searched for, it's more than 10 years old, I have searched for and placed my video pre-fight of the Canelo-Erislandy Lara fight. Right? Lara at the time, not today. By the way, he's a Hall of Famer when Lara has a belt today, 10 years later. But understand, Lara at the time was a mover. He's a southpaw. Right, folks? He was also roughly the same size as Canelo. He wasn't dealing with a huge weight gain from 147, right? If you want to get more recent, 154 up to 168. We knew Lara could handle the weight. I picked Lara in that fight before the fight because I thought Lara had the superior footwork to Canelo, the superior hand speed, and was the better athlete. Folks, that's not the only time I've picked a southpaw mover against Canelo. Look up my Billy Joe Saunders video. I thought Saunders was going to beat Canelo. Same reasons, right? I thought Saunders too slick. Southpaws know righties better than righties know southpaws. Right? I thought Saunders gave away that fight. Because if the Billy Joe Saunders who fought the first 6 rounds against Chris Eubank showed up, I thought Canelo would have been in trouble. Saunders got lulled into the pocket. Now let me just point out, I picked Bivol over Canelo. Right? Understand, Bivol was an underdog going into that fight. Right? I thought a skilled mover could give Canelo problems. But let me make a few points here. Right? You have to beat Bivol to beat Canelo if you're on your back foot, don't you? Right? You saw the scoring, too, of the Bivol-Canelo fight. And you thought to yourself, my eyes are telling me that Bivol won by more rounds than that. But yet the scoring in that fight was razor close. Wasn't that a fight where Bivol, because he sweeps the last, let's say, 4 rounds of the fight, Bivol really did make it impossible for star-struck judges. And keep in mind, going into that fight, Canelo's facing a champion from a heavier weight class who was unbeaten. Right? Starstruck judges could not rob Bivol in that fight because Bivol just looked too damn good. Now, my question to people out there is whether you think if you swapped out Bivol for Terence Crawford against Beterbiev, do you feel Crawford goes the distance in that fight? I don't. I think Crawford's too small. Right here you have a weight gap. You also have a better Canelo than you had in the past. In other words, Canelo's not static. He knew that Lara outmoved him in that fight. Right? At a minimum, he knew that that fight was close. That fight's close on the scorecards, folks. Right? He had the fight against Billy Joe Saunders. He understood that Saunders was a tough matchup. Saunders is coming back in that fight before Canelo lands the uppercut that fractures Saunders' eye socket. Now Canelo has figured out, right? I have to move more against mover types. Look at the Jermell Charlo fight. Right? As I sit here today, I think Charlo has faster feet than Canelo. But Canelo understood he could run over. That's what he does. He could run over to Charlo. He can take chances he couldn't take against a Bivol, right? A guy his size or bigger. Against smaller guys, Canelo can afford to be aggressive. Canelo also has the great chin. He's blessed with a great chin to go with great defense. So here I am watching Crawford against Madrimov. And I see the premier closer, right, in boxing. Not a weight class, in boxing. Crawford goes into that fight with a knockout streak that went back years. Right? Understand, some of the people he knocked out are A-listers. Errol Spence, for example. Crawford stops. So you're looking at Crawford against Madrimov, and you understood. And I know Madrimov, long amateur career. Underrated by the public. Right? But there's a moment in that fight where you understood that Crawford was having a problem hurting Madrimov. Forget knocking him down. He was having a problem hurting Madrimov. Crawford had to start relying on a jab. Crawford makes a decision during that fight. The knockout's not here. I've got to outbox this guy. Right? You're aware of the power dynamic that entire fight. There are times where Madrimov gets in the pocket and you think to yourself, well, if this brother just draws a line in the sand here. If he says, okay, I'm in the pocket, let's trade shots. Let's continue to trade shots. You thought Crawford would be in trouble. It didn't look to me like Crawford's punch carried to 154 pounds. Wasn't that the problem in the Jermell Charlo fight? I saw Jermell Charlo destroy Brian Castano in their last fight. You know, I saw Jermell Charlo beat Erickson Lubin, a fight I thought he'd have a tough time with, by first round KO. You know Jermell Charlo has a punch. You couldn't have guessed that looking at the Canelo footage. Right, so folks, this is not a fan club site. I actually have subscribers who used to openly accuse me in the comment section of Canelo video after Canelo video that I did. Aztec Warrior comes to mind. Of, being biased against Canelo. Right, folks, I'm not trying to be biased against any fighter, nor am I trying to be in love with any fighter. This is really a gambling site. Right? I'm just trying to tell it like it is. I was with Crawford until I saw Crawford at 154. I've been watching Canelo closely. He's better than advertised. Right? Understand, I know the knock on Canelo is that he looks good for a portion of the fight, and then at the end of the fight, suddenly Golovkin's hanging around. Golovkin's actually landing shots. John Ryder's hanging around. John Ryder's actually landing shots. Right? People are looking at Canelo fights and they're saying, look, Canelo isn't a closer these days, is he? Right? Jaime Munguia makes it the distance. Edgar Berlanga makes it the distance. Right? What I'm seeing is a different fighter. I'm actually seeing a fighter who, to me, when he jumps out to a lead now, he's literally parental with some fighters. Right? I thought he could have stopped Jaime Munguia. He knows he has a lead. He decides he's going to box. He has a deep reservoir of boxing skills. Canelo, if he wants, can outbox most in the sport. I'm watching that Edgar Berlanga fight. Now understand, I'm originally from New York City. Right? I'm a Bronx High School of Science grad. I follow New York City boxing. Right? New York City, vibrant city in boxing. Right? There was a moment there where Riddick Bowe's high school classmate, Mike Tyson, ruled the roost. Then Riddick Bowe later would rule the roost. Look it up, folks. They're from the same high school. You had Shannon, Buchanan, Briggs. Folks, I have not left the borough of Brooklyn. Right? New York, rich fighting tradition. Paulie Malignaggi, Zab Judah, Joseph Agbeko, rich boxing tradition. Big news in New York was Edgar Berlanga. He was knocking everyone out. You look at Berlanga, and he looks bigger than Canelo. So you're watching that fight, and you thought, wow, will Canelo be able to back up Edgar Berlanga? Big guy, big punch. Right? Folks, you didn't have to wait long, did you? Bell sounds for the first round. Let's say by the end of the second round, Canelo has Edgar Berlanga up on the ropes. How long did it take Canelo to get Jermell Charlo up on the ropes? So you're telling me that the Terence Crawford who, quite frankly, was not decisively ahead going into the later rounds against Madrimov. I would argue he's never decisively ahead against Madrimov. I thought the scorecards were a joke in that fight. Right? I thought that fight was close. You're telling me that Terence Crawford is going to jump up and is going to do exactly what against Canelo? Folks, if Canelo draws a line in the sand and it's a shootout and both guys stay in the pocket, Canelo, I don't care how they look, right? They look like they're the same size. That's not the way boxing works. Canelo has the bigger punch. Canelo's the guy who actually beat Kovalev, a heavy punching champion, at 175. I think Canelo wins a shootout. So now you're going to tell me that Crawford's going to be on his back foot and he's going to be outboxing Canelo, right, to such an extent that we're going to forget the fact that Canelo is viewed as a boxing treasure. Canelo is viewed like Ali was viewed in the 70s, where you saw countless close Ali fights. Countless close Ali fights. And you knew Ali was going to get most of these decisions. Right? Folks, you have to beat the champ to take his title. In Canelo's case, Canelo is one of the champions of boxing. Right? If you're going to take that crown from Canelo, particularly in Canelo's weight class, you're going to have to decisively beat him. Crawford's on his back foot against Madrimov, isn't he? Look at the CompuBox numbers for that fight. Crawford's relying on a jab. Isn't that what you think he's going to have to do out of necessity, 14 pounds up against Canelo? Isn't that what he has to do to survive? And Crawford barely beat Madrimov. Forget the judges' scorecards. Let's just keep it real. Right? This is our boxing channel. We've known each other for years. That Madrimov fight was close, wasn't it? Forget what you're telling your friends. Think about what you really believe. If Crawford fights the same fight he fought against Madrimov, the fight that snapped Crawford's multi-year knockout streak, he will have lost to Canelo by what? 2 rounds? 3 rounds? Right? I mean, folks, if Crawford can't beat Canelo from the outside in, right, moving around, fighting the Erislandy Lara fight, if Crawford can't beat him that way, in the comment section of this YouTube video, tell us the way Crawford can beat him. Let me tell you a problem, too, that hardcore fans have. Right? And it's a profound problem. Is we lose sight of what the rest of the world is thinking. Right? So I've talked about that Beterbiev-Bivol fight. And I've just said, Beterbiev really couldn't throw that right hand the first couple of rounds. And people look at me puzzled. Right? They saw a guy on his front foot backing up a guy on his back foot. They saw alpha against beta. That's how they scored the fight. Right? Boxing hardcore people can't process that. We're so busy, thinking of things like, oh man, this guy's landing that left to the body, isn't he? Right? We don't keep track of the visual. Right? I'm telling you, there's a string of Deontay Wilder fights. Right? I saw Deontay Wilder against Luis Ortiz, for example. And I'm looking at that fight and I'm thinking, wow, Ortiz is dominating this fight. Right? I'm thinking, man, Ortiz is really handling Deontay Wilder. Then, of course, After Wilder wins the fight by stoppage, I'm doing an autopsy on the fight, and I'm looking at the judges' scorecards, and they're in favor of Wilder. And I'm thinking, what? What fight did they see? Well, they saw a guy with the biggest punch in boxing, towering over an opponent, hinting at throwing that punch, throwing it on occasion, having the lefty move away, but get flushed out the pocket. That's the fight they saw. What fight do you think the public's going to see here? Canelo, who you know is a bigger puncher than Crawford. Right? Crawford, a smaller man, doing what? Moving away from Canelo? You think that's going to convince the public that the guy trying to take the other guy's title at 168 on his back foot, moving away from a guy who's a bigger slugger, who you understand is going to try to be aggressive, who you understand is not going to stand there and allow Crawford to take away his body like Crawford took away Evanesian's body, who is hard to find with a jab, who, if he gets in the pocket and starts a sequence, isn't going to suddenly bob and weave his way out of the pocket. He's going to stay in the pocket, unlike Madrimov. And he's going to try to close the show. Who's most likely to get a flash knockdown in the fight? I would say it's Canelo. Right? You're watching the Jaime Munguia fight. Munguia completely lucid, alert, not hurt at all. Suddenly he's on the canvas. Right? Edgar Berlanga, big guy, big punch. Suddenly he's on the canvas. By the way, where'd that Berlanga knockdown take place? Isn't he over by the ropes when he gets knocked down? Where did the Jermell Charlo knockdown take place? Isn't he over by the ropes? Right? You want to have gamblers nervous. You say 3 words. Canelo in Vegas. Right, folks, do you think the crowd is going to show up and it's going to be a Crawford crowd? In Las Vegas, the weekend of Mexican independence? So if Canelo walks in and he is who he is, crowd favorite, icon of boxing, bigger brand. Let me repeat that. Bigger brand than Terence Crawford. Right? Long time cash cow. Folks, the purse history of these two fighters is not close. You don't have to get touchy-feely and say, who really is the most popular fighter? Right? Sure, if I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, okay, Bud wins that. Right? If I'm anywhere outside of Nebraska, the favorite fighter is Saul Alvarez, isn't it? Right? So I have a lot of respect. I mean, folks don't understand. I've been there. I've done that. Here's a shocker, a southpaw. A slick southpaw. Shakur Stevenson thinks that Bud has a shot. Right? I have no doubt that the boxing hardcore is looking at Bud's counterpunching ability, the fact that Bud is ambidextrous, can give a lot of looks, the fact that Crawford is a different fighter every fight. Not only that, he learns things in fights and then times stuff. Right? The Yorkis-Gamboa fight, the announcer, the person doing the telecast, starts praising Gamboa, and you see Crawford on his back foot deliberately. This is who Crawford is. And Crawford has the uppercut timed perfectly. So at the moment that Yorkis-Gamboa thinks he has Crawford in trouble, Crawford has set up an uppercut that not even the guy announcing the fight sees coming. Right, folks? Do you think Crawford's going to be in the pocket willing to trade uppercuts with the guy who broke Billy Joe Saunders' eye socket? I don't. Right, folks? I thought Caleb Plant was underrated against Canelo. Right? Understand, my belief that a mover would have a chance against Canelo goes back years. Right? Caleb Plant, a better mover than Terence Crawford in terms of his legs and stuff. Let's give Plant that. Right? Caleb Plant, again, he's fighting a better fight than the judges are giving him credit for. Right? You need to realize when you're dealing with a judge's favorite. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm just saying it's reality. Right? There comes a time in that fight where Canelo, who is relentless in that fight, where Canelo eventually catches up to a tiring Plant, when Plant is where else? Up against the ropes, right? And Canelo is still throwing heavy punches. Right? Look at the end of that Caleb Plant fight. You're going to see he hurts Plant. Plant walks across the ring at one point. There's nowhere to go. Now you're telling me, and let me just openly say, Jake Paul pulled this off. I tip my hat to Jake Paul. But you're telling me Crawford with a huge weight gain. 14 pounds is a lot for a guy who last fought at 154. Right? You're telling me that Crawford's going to carry that weight as comfortably as Caleb Plant did in his fight against Canelo, as Dimitri Bivol, who's naturally bigger than Canelo, did in his fight against Canelo? You know, if you put a gun to my head and asked me to name the best mover in the heavyweight division, even today, after the Caballel fight, I would still say it's Frank Sanchez. Canelo used to spar with Frank Sanchez in Eddie Reynoso's gym. Right? Canelo's actually spent time upping his game against movers, heavy movers, where there's more to think about than Terence Crawford's punch. Right there, you're thinking about a heavyweight throwing punches back. Let me say this too. You know, that Liam Smith fight, I know it was years ago. Right? Liam Smith is actually a very smooth customer, right? There's certain fighters who are bellwethers for me. And I know Liam Smith's rough and tumble, right? Whatever the record, whatever happened in that Chris Eubank rematch, and I think very highly of Eubank too, but whatever happened in that Eubank rematch, I know Liam Smith shows up and he's ready to bring it. Right? He's not running away from anybody. Right? You know the rest. He's fighting a motivated Canelo in one of Canelo's best fights to date. Canelo decides, just like he did in the Rocky Fielding fight, he decides, you know what? This lion, I'm going to tame him by taking out his body. Right? I want people to look at the film of Canelo against Liam Smith. Tell me why he can't do that to Terence Crawford. Let's say he shows up and Crawford's hard to read, right? Crawford's doing a serial killer thing where you really don't know who he is. He's blending in the crowds, but yet you understand that you can't find him up top. You can't read his feints, right? You can't tell whether he's hurt because Crawford has that poker player face, doesn't he? Right? Why can't Canelo put his head down and say, look, like Sam Langford, kill the body and the head will follow? Why can't Canelo just say, you know, I'm going to throw some hellacious shots to this guy's ribs? If he wants to stay in the pocket with me, great. I roll out of bed weighing 168. This guy rolls out of bed weighing what? 154? Maybe the guy has recently gained weight. That's supposed to do what to my mindset? Right? Canelo has paths to victory here, I admit. I was looking at boxing film and I thought, Crawford has a real shot here. Right, folks? When the facts change, when Crawford lays an egg against Madrimov, when I see Crawford heavier than 147 and he is not exactly scaring the daylights out of me, when I myself wonder what would happen if Crawford got lost on his way to Canelo and found himself in at 160. Right? Crawford, Erislandy, Lara. That's a tough fight. Lara throws one of the best straight lefts in the entire sport. He has more power than Crawford. Right? Crawford against Janabek. If you don't know these names, you need to know them. Crawford against Janabek, wow. That's a difficult fight. Janabek, by the way, also a southpaw. Right? Crawford against Hamza Shiraz, that's a tough fight. Shiraz, also a southpaw, but fighting as a righty. Crawford against Carlos Adames, that's a tough fight. Folks, these are tough fights. I'm not sure Crawford survives at 160. To fight Canelo, he'd have to gain 8 pounds from 160. Right? I'm on the Canelo side of the play. I'm expecting Canelo to be a favorite. I'm going to have to look at prop bets to squeeze value out of the play. Yeah, Crawford is one of the best fighters I have ever seen. I love Crawford's corner. I'm not surprised that Shakur Stevenson is good friends with Crawford because, like Crawford, Shakur Stevenson is a technician. Right? I'm not surprised that Chris Eubank found his way to Bomac. Right? Because I'm sure Eubank, like all of us, is looking at Crawford and is saying, my goodness, this guy is a great fighter. So too is Canelo. Right? I'm just telling you, Canelo is defensively blessed. I'm just telling you, Canelo has a great chin. Right? In the comment sections, if you don't think he does, tell us. In a career where the guy has fought Miguel Cotto, right? He's fought Kovalev, he's fought Golovkin. Tell us the fight where he stood up, where he's on the canvas, where you thought, man, how's Canelo going to make it out of this round? Right? I know someone's going to mention the first Golovkin fight, but just understand, Canelo has fought guys with a lot of power. And his chin has held up. You don't think a fight against a guy who's one fight removed from the welterweight division, right? A fight taking place at super middleweight, you don't think that's when Canelo's chin's going to crack, do you? Right? Also understand, there is a long way between finding Errol Spence's body, which can be done. You have to deal with punching power and all that other stuff. But finding Errol Spence's body and finding Canelo's body, right? Recognize the skill. Canelo's extremely hard to hit in the body. Extremely hard to hit. Right? So if you don't think Crawford is going to catch Canelo, if you think Crawford is going to beat Canelo on the scorecards, give us that narrative in the comment section of this YouTube video. How's he going to do so without getting hit by Canelo? Can we agree that this fight is over if Canelo comes out and drops Crawford like he dropped Jermell Charlo, Edgar Berlanga, Jaime Munguia? Right? Understand, Canelo's not Zhilei Zhang, who can drop a Joe Parker twice and then lose enough of the other rounds to lose on the scorecard. You already know Canelo is a good enough boxer where the scorecards without anyone hitting the canvas are likely to favor Canelo. right? Canelo's more than competitive as a boxer, right? And you understand, if Canelo gets you down, even for a moment, your chances of winning the fight, particularly given Canelo's box office history. Boxing, rightly or wrongly, takes care of its own. The people feeding the sport get fed themselves, right? Before a judge is going to vote against Canelo in a fight where Canelo has not hit the canvas, the opponent has to look as good as Bivol looked against him. If there's any ambiguity, the tie goes to the cash cow king. That's how I see it. Tell us how you see it. In the comment section of this YouTube video, yes, I picked Crawford over Canelo when Crawford was 147 pounds. Right? I've now seen Crawford at 154. I've now seen more of Canelo. I think Canelo wins the fight. I think Crawford's path to success is a very steep one. Right? For the record, just full disclosure, I wasn't making videos at the time, but had I made a video, I would have picked James Toney over Roy Jones. Right? Both guys are Hall of Famers. It is what it is. Right? Roy Jones came out that night and shocked me. Right? Outboxed James Toney, knocked James Toney down. Right? If you feel that Crawford can do that, tell us about it. It's an interactive forum. Right? My crowd's not bashful. Tell us about it in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.